James Greenwood was a British journalist. He was born in 1832 in London into a family of 11 children in the house of a coach trimmer or worker finishing lace and linings for carriage building. He initially worked as a printer before turning to writing, penning adventure stories for the British children's magazine The Boy's Own Magazine from 1861 onwards. In 1865 he became a journalist on the Pall Mall Gazette, which also employed his brother. Greenwood was probably one of the pioneers of investigative journalism, making a sensation in 1865 with his report for the Pall Mall Gazette, where his brother convinced him to spend a night dressed as a vagrant in the casual ward of a London workhouse, which fancy terminology denoted a filthy room wherein homeless people could spend the night. His article of the lowly conditions he experienced there led to a major outcry. Greenwood would next go on to investigate the conditions of railway workers. Subsequently, in 1874, he claimed to have witnessed an organized fight between a dog and, quote, a dwarf, though when the authorities later tried to investigate, they couldn't find any proof for Greenwood's story. I don't have much interesting to report on concerning Greenwood's literary career outside of his journalism, aside from him having co-written his first book with his brother and future employer Frederick, him having authored 2 books in defense of the working class and their plight, namely Unsentimental Journeys or Byways of Modern Babylon and 7 Curses of London, and the fact that his last book, the subject of today's review, came out in 1905. The book, Among the Cranks, came out when Greenwood was already 73 years of age and seems to have followed a 22-year hiatus from Greenwood as a writer. It is an odd book, ostensibly a collection of the stories coming from inmates of an insane asylum. A very interesting premise, reminiscent, for example, of The Red Flower from Garshin. However, the issue is that the stories presented herein, while possibly accurate to real stories Greenwood may have heard, as this does seem to be the sort of thing he would be all gung-ho about, aren't the most exciting, and that's just a shame. That is, if you can draw genuine entertainment from the delusions of people long since dead. Putting that aspect aside, the stories narrated by the inmates aren't nearly as fantastical as you would hope for. One includes a lady obsessed with post-mortem soul migration into cats, a tale of soul exchange in dreams, or a story where a man is convinced he has seen a vision of his utter ruin inside of a pool, and goes around hunting to shoot a man he recognizes from his vision in order to, quote, break the spell. But most of the contents are rather dry. Indeed, a lot of the stories here sound like the type where a different writer could use them as the base premise of an entire book. Like the story of a man who accidentally became a member of an anarchist group that sponges him for money, or the story of a worker who almost got framed by the accountant of the company for fraud, or the tale of a disfigured youth whom circumstances have led to be wrongly pronounced dead and denied his rightful inheritance by greedy relatives. All of these sound like plots that are starting to get somewhere, and then the interview ends, and the usually unnamed doctor, who has the annoying habit of summing up the patient's story before they tell it, so one is forced to hear it twice, will dismiss the whole thing as nonsense. The one truly fascinating story in this collection is that of a man convinced his old uncle had turned himself into a blue bottle fly he keeps around inside of a glass bottle. Though Greenwood would write no more fiction after this, he would carry on until his death at the age of 96. I must hereby express thanks to John Simkin of SpartacusEducational.com for providing information about Greenwood, including confirmation that he authored Among the Cranks, the only source to definitely say so.